For he turned to me, some of your translations may say, and he heard my cry. He also brought me up out of a horrible pit, out of the miry clay. Some of your translations say mud and mire instead of out of the miry clay. And he set my feet upon a rock, or gave me a place to stand. This is who God is. But we must begin doing some things to stand on that rock. Pray with me real quick. God, thank you for being here. Lord, this feels funny to us. As Miss Alicia said, I miss our people. I miss their faces. I miss their nuances. And Lord, bring us together somehow, some way, through this these airways, through this medium that we're using. Thank you for it, Lord. Without it, I'm not sure how we would do or what we would do. But you provided, and for that we thank you. Even though it confuses me at times, I thank you for it. Lord, you confuse me at times too. But I certainly thank you for you and for who you are. Lord, as we look to a brighter horizon, may we learn some things today from your word about stepping out and stepping up. Thank you for being so good to us and blessing us with your son, Jesus. And we ask it all in his great name. Amen. So what do we have here? We have a way to get out of the weeds, out of the mud, out of the pit, out of the mire, as it says here, this mire, something that holds on to it, something that's holding us back. Where does it start? It starts here with a cry out. And we're going to talk about 3 C's this morning, a cry out, a confession, and a consent. And we're going to start with this cry out. Deliverance from this mud, it begins with a cry. Now, not just tears. There's a saying, nothing weeps more than a chunk of ice. It doesn't get you anywhere. There's not much there, okay? Many times we cry, but the question is, do we change? We cry our eyes out, but still refuse to change. Maybe you're there, don't know, all right? Many times tears flow because we want God to change us. But we want him to bend his rules as he changes us. The only thing that can change us is him not bending his rules and we adhering to those. All right. We want him to bless our disobedience. We want him to bless our half-heartedness. That's not what this is about here in Psalm 40. Okay. God is not going to pat you on the back and say, "Oh, who could you blame for all of this? Who could blame you for all of this?" He's not going to do that. But he does want you up on your feet, living life large, living abundantly, living effectively, maybe like never before. Even though today you may feel like you're in the mud. All right. It starts with this cry from our deepest parts. I was in a hospital that used to be on I-10 close to Uvalde there 8 or 9 years ago, visiting one of our church family that was there, and from down the hall I heard this blood-curdling cry, scream, and one of the nurses came knowing I was there as a fellow believer. She came and asked if I would come and comfort this mom. But she had just been told by the doctors that they were going to have to unplug her 20-something-year-old son from the machines. And this is the kind of cry we're talking about, the cry that comes from your deepest, innermost part, a cry out to God. We often whimper to God, maybe, but Psalm 40 is talking about this cry from our deepest part out to God, from your soul, as if your life depends upon it, because it does. It really does. Not because of the corona, but just because of the fact that life is hard and your life, as God designed it to be, depends on you crying out from your innermost part to him. This cry is aimed at God alone. It's not to please anyone around you, not to pacify anybody that wants you to change or wants you to get out of the mud. It's directed at God alone. Why? Because aiming it at God means you're aiming it at the one that made all things, rules all things, and, hallelujah, can change all things. That's why you aim it at God. He has the ability because he made it. He has the ability because he controls it. And he has the ability because he can change everything about you. He can bring you up out of that mud to do what? Establish your steps. Give you a firm place to stand. As the second part of the second verse of Psalm 40 says. Yeah. The one who says nothing is impossible. That's God. Nothing is impossible. You might say, man, I'm so far in the mud, and then this corona thing came along. It just seems like there's one thing after another pushing me down, pushing me back, saying, no, you can't. But God is the God that says nothing is impossible through his Son, Jesus Christ. He has not changed. That's good. Right? Good news for us that may be struggling this morning, okay? He talks about this a lot. It's one of his principles that we often overlook because he says, cry out. And we often overlook that. He says, that is what I'm waiting for, is your cry to me. All right? He says, whatever is within you, let it come out. Scream, cry out. And this is not the only place he says this. It's all over his word, certainly all over Psalms. Psalms 9:12, Psalm 116, verses 1 and 2, Psalms chapter 3, verse 4, Psalm 106, verses 44 and 45, Psalm 72:12, Psalm 9:9, on and on and on. We see in his word, he says, cry out to me. Cry out from a deep place. Why in the world would getting out of the mud start with this soul-searching cry? I mean, hey, God already knows anyway. He's in tune with us already, correct? Yes. But even though he knows, he wants to hear our cry because he's basically waiting on us to get real about our need for him. He's waiting on us to see how desperately we need him and then to voice that to him. In Exodus 3, verses 7 and 8, we see the people, the Jews, God's people, being expected to do this same thing. And they did do this same thing, all right? In other words, this idea of crying out to God is not something newfangled that just came along, in Psalms and helped David get through some problems or what have you. It's been going on since the start of things. And, of course, we know that the Jewish folks had their struggles from time to time, as we all do. And here we see it. And the Lord said, I have surely seen the oppression of my people who are in Egypt, and I have heard their cry because of their taskmasters, for I know their sorrows. So I have come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them up from that land to a good and large land, to a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanites and the Hittites and the Amorites, all the ites, okay? He said, I've heard their cry, okay? God's wanting to hear from you. God's wanting to hear that cry, all right? He's waiting for us to get real. Inside us, it lets us know that we are in a need that maybe we haven't wanted to admit, maybe that we haven't wanted to face. Okay, we've had people all around us, and maybe we've told ourselves, things have a way of working out. It'll be okay. It's going to be all right? And we have a tendency to say, things will get better, quote unquote, all right? God's saying, no, it does not work that way. When this cry comes from your innermost being, it's finally us saying to him and to ourselves, I've got to have God. No, things aren't going to work out. Things aren't just going to magically happen. I need God in my situation right now. I've got to have it. And this cry from our innermost being says that not only to God, to those around us that they hear, but to our own self. We have to remind our own self sometimes of things, okay? And don't say you don't do that. You remind yourself to do things all the time. Let's be honest. You remind yourself to stop at the store on the way home and get something that is needed at the house. You remind yourself to pay this bill. You remind yourself, you're all the time reminding yourself Don't, just because you're 20-something doesn't mean you don't remind yourself. You do. And God's saying, hello, you need to remind yourself, I am the one that can pull you up. I am the one. I am your answer. I am your only one. Okay? Also, why does God want us to cry out? Because God sees a great advantage in this crying out, because it brings you and your relationship with Him closer together. This cry from your deepest, darkest, innermost part, from your soul, from your innermost being, that to Him builds a relationship with Him. The one you're crying out to builds a relationship. For those of you that had relationship problems with friends or within your marriage, and it has come back together in a long hug and a deep cry, I think you know what I'm talking about. When you bared your soul to your friend, bared your soul to your spouse, bared your soul to someone you hold near and dear, cried about it, got real honest about it, that made that relationship stronger. God knows that. God made you. He knows what makes relationships stronger. He says, when you cry out to me, when you bare your soul to me, watch out. We're going to get closer. God says, I want that. And God says, you need that. All right? It can happen. All right? So yeah, this idea of, hey, this cry through your innermost part is indicative of your readiness for a closer relationship with Him. And it's what God is after. That's what God wants, okay? That's His desire. And your cry out to Him shows your desire. Now, this cry, it can come in two different forms. One is the desperate one. God, I need you, and God, I need you alone. The desperation cry. Nothing wrong with that at all. That's where many of us are, especially right now. God, we don't know what's going on. We need you. I was already on the brink, or I was already in the mud. God, I certainly need you now. My cry is desperate. I am desperate. God says, bring it on. It's okay. It's okay to be desperate. I have that solution too. But there's also the deliberate cry, where we finally realize, I want God and God alone. That growing cry, so to speak. My foot dabbles in the mud sometimes. I'm not all the way in the mud. The weeds are around me sometimes, but I manage to part them sometimes. But God, I don't want any part of the mud. I don't want any part of the weeds. God, I want you and you alone. So yes, I can cry out to God, please God, or God, I need more of you. I want you and I want you alone. I've been trying to mix you with a few things here and there, and it hasn't worked out. Okay. In other words, we don't have to always wait until we're up to our ears in mud. We can cry out to God just wanting more. Not more things, but more of Him. All right? That's deliberate. There's desperate and a deliberate. Both cries that God can certainly hear. Both cries that Psalm 40 certainly applies to. Both cries have the ability in the end to do what? Set you on high ground. Set you on solid ground. All right? Set my feet upon a rock and establish your steps. Either way, I urge you, I beg you, cry out to God this morning. Why? You need to. He's listening. He's ready. Okay? Say, God, help me. God, help me. God, help me. And mean it. All right? Bring heaven to a standstill with your cries. Get that serious about it. Okay? I don't know if any of you have ever been on an airplane. I have. Don't much like it. You ever been on an airplane with a baby? You sure enough don't like it. All right? But you know what a baby does? A baby on an airplane, especially at takeoff, it's different, okay? They don't like the change of pressure. They don't like the noise. They don't like the movement, and they can't really tell what's going on. They don't like anything about the takeoff. All right? They scream their lungs out. You talking about a heartfelt outcry or cry out? This baby is doing this at takeoff. But as the plane levels off, they realize then, hey, it's okay. It's okay. we're safe. That's what God is saying. Cry out to him in your fear, in your agony, in your unusual circumstance, situation that we're all in right now, of having to deal with the kids every day, dealing with our spouses day in and day out. We can't go. Things are out of whack. Just like this baby. God's saying, hey, I'm here. I have not changed. All is well. Let's take this time to concentrate on one another. Cry out to me, okay? Cry out that baby on an airplane taking off kind of cry. Get that serious. Admitting you don't understand, admitting you don't really know what's happening. It's okay to not be happy with what's happening. It's okay to not be happy with yourself, but it's not okay to stay that way. God is going to change our situations, I assure you, and God is waiting to change you. Allow him to do so. Okay? So after we cry out, what was the next C? Confess. It's next. All right? Yes, we often think sin, all right? But we got to think wider than just merely, and I say merely, that takes a while, right? Confessing sin. We got to think a little wider than just merely confessing sin. Confession is a bigger thing than just sin, okay? God is asking us, urging us to get very, very transparent with him. Yeah, God knows everything, but he's saying, voice it. Voice it. Listen to yourself. I will listen to you. It does you good to hear what you don't like, okay? Psalm 145:18 says this, the Lord is near to all who call on him. To all who call on him, what? In truth. God's saying, open your doors. Let me see. Voice it, okay? Tell him everything, okay? The mess you're in. What's holding you back? What's on your mind and heart? Who's on your case? Who's made you mad? Who's on your nerves? Who's broken your heart? Spill it, he says. Spill it all right? Get it off your chest, as we might say to one of our children or someone. God is, in essence, saying, not only get it off your chest, but get it out of those dark, dusty closets where you've been hiding it in your soul. Tell it to me. I know it already, but tell it to me. When you voice it, God says, it will help. Right? So yeah, confession. Doesn't need an old guy with a bald head and in a black robe and in a dark room to talk about it. God says, come to me. All right? Get serious about putting a bright light on all that you are. He says, hey, it's okay. I know where you are, but I know where you can be. And my promise is good. All right? God said, this is my form of open heart surgery. You do the cutting. You do the exposing. I do the repairing. He said it can be tough. It can be tough, but it's desperately needed. Without it, you're gonna be in this mud for a long time. He says, come clean. Come clean. Of course, the sin, yes, confess it, but let me see all of who you are. Confession. Confession is needed. Confession does the heart good. All those cliches, all those things that we pull from Bible verses, but yet we don't do it. We hit the high points, but we don't come totally clean. God's saying, hey, come totally clean. Don't let your pride get in the way. I know all about you already. All right? Don't try and cover up. It's okay. It's not going to work with me anyway. All right? So God says, hey, give me all your laundry. I will take care of it. Your dirty laundry, no problem. All right? Let him see it. Name it. Release it. Let him have it one by one. Yeah, we often say, count your many blessings. God says, hey, count your hang-ups. Let me have it. Count the things that are just frustrating you. Give them to me. Voice them to me. It does you good to voice everything about you to me. Yes, I already know it. I'm not trying to find out something I don't know. I'm trying to help you come clean. Because I can do that. But you've got a voice. He said everything about coming out of this miry clay, out of this slimy place, out of this mud, has to do with you voicing. He says, you can. Crying out, using your voice, confessing, crying out. Okay? There's conviction going on in your life about what all is hidden in there. Conviction, that's a hand-delivered invitation, God says, for me. And confession is your RSVP, that you're on board, that you're there. So yes, as you're convicted, God's saying, confess. Let me hear it. Let yourself hear it. Confession clears the path for God to come in and get to work. He says, take down the barriers, take down the under construction, get over the fact that, yes, you are under construction. Let me come in and do the work. You've tried to do it, and you kind of mess things up. He says, let me do the work, please, especially in this time that seems to be especially dark with circumstances. Let me in. Let me clean house. Let me help you. Voice it to me, okay? He says, no doubt, confession is hard, every part of it, but all parts of confession bring you steps into freedom. Every part of confession is a step. There's no changing that. But, hey, confession is not complete until we accept what? God's forgiveness. Let's take a look at 1 John back in the New Testament at the very end, right before Revelation. A few little books there, all named John. All right. Right before Revelation, turn all the way to the back, and you'll be just about there. 1 John, the first chapter, verse 8 and 9, this idea of freedom coming after confession. Okay. If we say that we have no sin, we deceive ourselves, and the truth is not in us. But if we confess our sins, he is what? Faithful and just to forgive us our sins and to cleanse us from all unrighteousness. That's God's word. That's God's promise to you. Okay? Turn over a page or so there to 1 John, the 3rd chapter, verse 21 and 22. Beloved, if our heart does not condemn us, we have confidence toward God. And whatever we ask, we receive from him because we keep his commandments and do those things that are pleasing in his sight. In other words, this morning, God is ready, willing, and able to free you from your mud hole by forgiving you. All right? He's ready. He's waiting. He's saying what? Cry out. He's saying what? Confess. All right? But many times we say we believe this, we say amen, we say preach, preacher, all the great things that we say, but sometimes the way we feel about ourselves keeps us in this mud hole. Even though we've cried out, even though we've confessed, we still feel like we're there because of our self-condemnation. Get this, your self-condemnation, when you say, oh, I'm just not worthy, I'm no good, your self-condemnation can't block God's forgiveness, but it can keep you from feeling God's forgiveness. It can't block the forgiveness, but it can certainly keep you from feeling like you're forgiven. Don't allow Satan to take you down that self-condemnation road. It is not a good place to be. Will keep you in the mud. It's not a place to stand or to have those steps that God is talking about over here in Psalm 40, those righteous steps, that steadfast place that we can actually claim and live in every day. God's promise. It's for us, okay? So when we allow self-condemnation to come in, it results in this twisted idea, this twisted resignation, I guess you could say, to our own capacity to sin rather than confidence in the fact that God is able to restore us. We're saying our sin is greater than God's restoration. That's dangerous territory, all right? God's restoration is greater than our sin. That's a great, great promise that we can claim. His restoration is more powerful than our sin. Claim that today, all right? In your confession. Understand that confession leads to forgiveness, and yes, you can be forgiven. And then forgiveness turns into repentance, where we don't go back to that mud hole. We don't go back to that place of needing forgiveness again. Okay? Now, granted, surrounded by what all we're surrounded in, we're going to wander back to the mud hole from time to time. But we have to understand that God doesn't want us to. And we have the ability with God in our life to not go there and stay. All right? And certainly we even have the ability to not go there at all. All right? God says, I don't want you there. Okay? God says, I don't want you there at all. All right? Cry out, confess, and then we consent. What does consent mean? In Webster, it says consent is voluntary agreement. Well, consent then is the prettiest part of this three-step process of getting out of the weeds, getting out of the hole, getting out of the pit. All right, it's not probably the easiest, but certainly a very vital part of it. All right, God does want you out of the mud. He wants you to win. Now consent to what He already wants. Let's go back to 1 John again, 5th chapter. In order to agree with Him. Okay? Who better to agree with than God? Mercy's sake, you might say, man, I don't hardly ever agree with anybody. You better start agreeing with God, and He says you can. He says you can stand strong. He says you can walk out of the weeds. He says you can live a life like you haven't experienced before. 1 John 5, verses 14 and 15. Now this is the confidence that we have in Him, Jesus Christ, that if we ask anything according to His will, He hears us. And if we know that He hears us, whatever we ask, we know that we have the petitions that we have asked of Him. Yes, asking God, agreeing with God. God is ready. God is ready this morning. Agree with Him. All right? Let's do this. Tell God, let's do this. Remind yourself, let's do this. You've given Him all your sins, all your hang-ups, all your concerns, all your dislikes. He is in the mode of changing them, shifting things around, rearranging things, forgiving them, and shining light to run out the darkness in your life. He doesn't want your life to continue to be in this mud, in this miry clay, in this mire. He says there's no need. All right? He says, I am at work. Now that you have cried out to me, now that you've confessed to me, I am at work. Get on board. Agree with me. All right? All of these steps, God is saying, have involved your mouth. Why is that? Because your faith has been covered with mud for quite some time. You know, my grandpa worked in the rice fields southwest of Houston for 50 years. And when you work in the rice field, mud is everywhere because rice grows in mud until it's time to be harvested. It likes water, so there's mud everywhere. The land that he worked was mostly what he would call black gumbo, black dirt. And so he many times wore rubber boots to protect his feet and what have you. But he didn't like wearing rubber boots. He was a cowboy boot wearing kind of guy. So many times he would go to the field in what he called his work boots, which were his oldest cowboy boots, and come home and they would be covered in mud. But he would immediately, when he got home, wash them off. Us grandkids, us grandboys especially, we didn't understand that because we knew exactly where he was going the next morning. He was going back to that same rice field to do whatever work needed to be done. Fix the levees, make the water level equal everywhere, do things in the mud again. And we didn't understand that, and we often would question him, and he would tell us, the reason I wash the mud off is because as the mud dries, it will deteriorate the leather. It will draw the oil out of the leather. It will cause what I've done to keep these boots as long as I have to deteriorate. It says, as the mud dries, it also dries out the leather. He said, that's why I clean them every night, put some more oil on them. He said, I'm taking care of my boots because they've taken care of me. But the mud has bad effects. Your faith may have been covered by mud for a long time, maybe for months, maybe years. And because of that, it has drawn the ability that your faith may have had out. It has drawn out the quality, the amount of your faith, and shriveled it down to where it's not what it once was. Maybe you feel hardly existent, your faith in God. God is saying, you're voicing of this and putting it into words, crying out to me, confessing to me, and now consenting to me. He says, let me take you back to this idea of your faithlessness is your biggest problem. Your step out of the mud hole had to begin somewhere else than your faith, because your faith has dwindled. The mud has sucked the life out of it, and it happens. Right? God says, I want you to be verbal. I want you to be loud. I want you to be crying out to me loudly, confessing long and hard, now consenting and agreeing with me. I want you to use that voice I've given you. I want you to be able to speak to me, and I want you to speak to me. You've always been able, but you've been quiet. And he says, now because of the mud, your faith is also very quiet and very small. God says, I not only need to hear from you, but you need to hear yourself in all three modes. You need to hear yourself cry out. You need to hear yourself confess. You need to hear yourself consent to me, that you're in agreement with me, that we can do this, that we can leave the mud hole behind. We can leave what's been holding us down behind. Why? Because Romans 10:17 reminds us about this idea of hearing and speaking. Okay, us hearing ourselves, not necessarily speaking, but the only way we can hear ourselves is to speak out loud. Okay, it's not just this idea of hearing. It's not just in Romans 10:17. It's not just about hearing from someone else. Not just about hearing from God or God Himself. It's hearing. Hey, what do I say? Okay, faith comes from hearing, and hearing by the word of Christ. Your faith will be built up by hearing your own voice speak the words of Christ. Speak them this morning, please. Please. Cry out to God. Confess all that you are and all that you are not. Okay. Consent with God that He is who He says He is. He is the one that is waiting to hear your cry. He is the one that can bring you up out of that horrible pit, out of that mud and mire, out of that miry clay. He is the one that can set you upon this solid rock and establish your steps in a godly way. Please cry out, confess, and consent. God bless you. Let's pray. God, change us today, please. Help us to become very verbal with you, very sincere with you, very transparent with you. God, may lives change from a distance from us, but very close to you, because you're in every home, in every car, and wherever folks are hearing this today, you are there, God. May they cry out to you. May they confess to you where they are. May they consent, come in agreement with you today that you are the one true God, and they can leave that mud behind. Wash those boots. Restore that faithfulness. God, we love you and we praise you, and we thank you for all that you are. Amen. Thank you all for listening today. Thank you for being part of Junction Church at Queens Road via the internet. Don't forget, 6:30 each evening this coming week, starting tonight with Pastor Jeremy. We will have some word for you, some music too in times. Don't forget about your tithes and offerings. Please mail them to the church at 909 Queens, Pasadena 77502. Things continue to go on. Bills continue to come in. And this also continues to be part of your praise to Him. It's through your tithes and offerings. God bless you. I miss you guys. It's weird having 3 or 4 people sitting around a living room here, and that's it. But that's where we are. That's where you are. So God bless you. Keep up the great work. We love you. If you need me, call me 281-831-6044. Hook up with me on Facebook on an instant message or email KennethO'Durham@AOL.com. Let's keep on going. People need Jesus. Show them a little bit of him every day. See you later. Bye-bye.